What is the book of Galatians? Well, Galatians was written by a man by the name of Saul of Tarsus, who was later renamed Paul the Apostle, on or around 48 to perhaps at most 50 AD. Now, the significance of the title, Galatians, is that, of course, Galatia, if you look out for it on even an ancient map, you're going to find it's not a city or even a country. It's a region of Asia Minor that, again, is known as modern-day Turkey, that Paul interacted with most during his first missionary journey. Now, the background of this book is fascinating because Galatians was written in response to the first false teaching or heresy in Christian history. While others, of course, would come along like the Gnostics and the Marcions, it was ultimately coined as Judaizers, or the Galatian heresy, that would claim that you couldn't believe in the Jewish Messiah, which would result in salvation, unless, of course, you first converted to and began observing physical rituals like circumcision and the worship of new moon festivals and Sabbath days. Now, this obviously needed to be knocked down fairly quickly, and Paul wasted no time. And in fact, the First Council of Jerusalem is the historical background by which this letter either led up to or was written around the same time as. And that, of course, gives us a very, very prominent place in religious history. The genre of literature that Galatians was written in is that of poetry, not in the sense that the words rhyme, but that it was meant to focus on ideas, doctrine, what you believe about God, as opposed to history, just the events being laid out for themselves, and then forming the conclusions based on that example, like Matthew through the book of Acts. Now, the reason we consider Galatians as more than just a letter written for that time and place is because Paul's writings were claimed and verified to be scripture for the same reasons that anything in the Bible is treated as more significant than personal letters or mere historical documents. During his first missionary journey, he not only taught accurately in line with the Old Testament scriptures, but also backed up those words with public miracles, just like the Old Testament prophets and modern-day apostles, the 12, were doing. Now, it's also worth noting, and this is why, again, Galatians is an important book for every Christian to read, is that it is the first book of the New Testament concerning when it was historically written. It covers material that takes place, of course, after the writing of Matthew and John, but it was written historically before all of them were put into circulation. This is worth knowing since skeptics claim that Christian beliefs developed and were embellished over time, while Galatians would serve as the earliest piece of written material about Christianity and contains all the same basic ideas that Christians believe today regarding the deity of Christ, the nature of salvation, the authority of Scripture, and, of course, the doctrine of the Trinity. So when we're reading Galatians, we're, for all intents and purposes, reading the first piece of Christian literature produced in history after the conclusion of the Old Testament in the book of Malachi. That's the book of Galatians.